Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Greetings, everybody. This is Krish Dhanam coming to you from Dallas, Texas. I am always honored and truly enthusiastic about Todd Huff inviting me to be a guest host on his radio program, The Todd Huff Radio Show. If you've heard me a minute or many times, you know that I take different trajectories on the American experience. I have talked about apologetics, I have talked about worldviews, I have talked to you ad nauseum about the Islam issue, the now uncovered H-1B issue that seems to plague the people that come from my own nation of birth, India. But today, as we look back on the fact that we just celebrated the July 4th weekend, and commemorated America's 250th anniversary, I thought I would talk about why America matters. Now, Todd called and asked if I would fill in for him for a couple of times, and I think in August I'm going to do it again. So we'll probably deal with some of the more toxic issues in those narratives. But today and tomorrow, or whichever sequence these particular recordings air, I'm grateful to Todd for always inviting me into his midst and giving me a privilege to be a part of his audience. Now, as an immigrant, I have traversed the globe. I have been to about 80 countries. My footprint has been fairly well chronicled. I'm in the public eye to the degree I want. The only social media I use is LinkedIn, and I kind of went digitally silent from all the other medias that were available in Facebook and Twitter and all of these things over a period of time. The reason I'm saying that is I'm not a very well-known voice like the other people he probably has or the guests he has, and many of you may not even know who I am. But as a young immigrant, I came to this country so 40 years ago this past March. $9 to my name, landed in New York, and then eventually made my way to Texas, which has been my home since then. My current roles and responsibilities are I am the Dean of the Patriot Institute at the Patriot Academy in Comfort, Texas. This is a campus that exists between Fredericksburg and Comfort and is a beautiful campus of about 120 odd acres, where we have something called the Patriot Institute. That an immigrant from India would have the joy of teaching young Americans about America's biblical history, America's historical significance, America's world dominance is something that probably dreams are made of. But why America matters is more important to me now as I look at this 250th celebration and look at all the toxicity in the air. When we have come together as part of this last election, we have seen a turmoil in the globe. The Iran war continues to wage. The ultimatums and other ultimatums have come and gone. Ceasefires have been broken. New bombings have begun. The Strait of Hormuz is again under threat. Oil will teeter. The economic indicators will show what they must. But when Todd reached out to me and said, will I fill in for a couple of broadcasts, I thought to myself, why don't I talk about the gratitude of this great nation? Why don't I talk about the hope of this great nation? Why don't I talk about the fact that it is the youngest of all nations in the world, and yet it has to seemingly attract a kind of love for those that see her and experience her for the first time, and a kind of hatred from those that almost are envious of what it stands for. Right now, I'm going through the book Revolution that Eric Metaxas wrote, which chronicles the history almost before the revolution. And I would encourage every one of you, Eric doesn't give me any royalties on this, but I would encourage every one of you to pick up that book get it in the Audible version because Eric himself narrates that particular book. Now, if you know him, you know that he does incredible research. So there is such a rich tapestry of America that existed even before the Revolution. And as he takes you through these different events, you marvel at the fact as how much of American history has been omitted to her own people, that many of them think that America actually began with Ronald Reagan and kind of ended with Barack Obama. But all of these things were predicted to a fault in terms of what we as a republic stand for. So using that as my backdrop, I'm going to take you back through a journey of why America matters. It is part of a speech I gave on the July 4th celebrations at our campus, where it was a short 10 minutes, but I'll try to include all the things I was not allowed to include because of the time constraints there. Now, my own journey began in the rural part of southern India in a small town called Vizag on the sleepy eastern seaboard. If you are a map connoisseur or a globe aficionado, find one and find the city of Calcutta, or Kolkata as it is now known, and the city of Chennai, which used to be Madras, on the eastern coast of India, the peninsula that hangs in the Bay of Bengal. Now, if you want to find where India is on your globe, look at where you are in Indiana or wherever else in this country you are and spin the globe halfway around the world and you'll probably settle on India. Now, the town of Visakhapatnam, or Vizag as it was known, was the headquarters of the Eastern Naval Command. I grew up there and my dream was always to come to America. My father worked for an American company, and as a result, I had some unique experiences that made me love America even before I got here. The first was because my dad worked for an oil company and it was a Western organization called Caltex Petroleum. We had many expats living in India, and as a result of that, we watched a lot of movies as a child. Now, John Wayne was America. Robert Morrison, given name, became John Wayne, that 6'4" strapping man who went to USC, was a lifeguard, and acted in also 100+ movies. John Wayne was America. In fact, one of the goofiest things I've ever done, and I've been around celebrity all my life, when I worked for the legendary Mr. Zig Ziglar, and as a result of that, I have seen athletes of dominance, industrialists of prominence, stars, you name it. I did seminars with all of them. For about a 10-year period. I think I traipsed this country speaking to audiences of between 10 and 15,000 twice a week. So I'm no stranger to celebrity, but one of the goofiest things I ever did was, it's almost like a pilgrimage. When I landed in the Orange County airport and I saw a big statue erected to Duke, John Wayne, I took a picture, actually took a selfie. I think the little immigrant in me, the little tourist in me came alive. Why John Wayne? John Wayne was America. John Wayne was larger than life. He was the silver screen hero. He was the true grit. He was the Rooster Cogburn. He was the Chasing in Hatari. He was the Sands of Iwo Jima. You name it. John Wayne was America. And I watched a lot of John Wayne movies as a kid. In most of his movies, you will see that he rose to the occasion and he was the good guy who vanquished the bad. Rio Bravo and some of the other westerns that he made, Sons of Katie the Elder, I could go on and on. Now, the reason I say that is, as a boy in India, I was inspired by John Wayne on a cinema screen learning about courage. The courage and the grit. I later on learned about his story, and I had the privilege one July 4th weekend to speak in Lake Panora in Iowa. And as I was driving down the freeway between Des Moines and this location, I saw a sign saying, Winterset, Iowa, birthplace of John Wayne. Immediately took my family there and actually got to see the childhood home where the eye patch from the movie True Grit, for which he won the Oscar. The reason I share this about courage is fascinating because John Wayne, in the very end of that movie True Grit, makes a jump on a horse. At that time, he was battling stomach cancer and was battling his own demons. But the courage, he did his own stunt, they say in that movie, almost as if to say that I am American, I'm larger than life. If you get a chance, go watch some of the old clips of John Wayne and Dean Martin, or John Wayne talking about America. Now, throughout his life and later on, there were controversies that arose, but ultimately John Wayne rose above that. John Wayne was America. Today, when I teach the youngsters and I bring up the name John Wayne, many don't know who he is. Many don't even know the likes of Jimmy Stewart. Many don't know the likes of Clark Gable. Many don't know the names. And I wonder why. Why have our heroes been so glossed over that most of our issues today are almost compartmentalized into the last 20 years? So my first reason why I loved America was the picture that America was presented to the rest of the world was primarily through the movies. And through the movies, we saw the heroes. And through the movies, we saw the heroes who were larger than life. Before we had the Indian cinema, we had great actors there, and the world had great actors. But American movies were legendary. So when I landed in America in 1986, I was quite surprised that era, that golden era of America's depiction was already on the slide. Which means I began to realize, as Orwell promised and as Huxley patterned later on, that if you are able to revision history, or revise history, sorry for that slip, if you're able to revise history and take away the glamour of the heroes who truly matter and give some kind of a stain to just about everything that signified greatness, you're going to succeed in a very, very short time to create a myopic view that everything you see in front of you is all that existed and all that matters. The current debates we have in the conservative circles about whether the President Donald Trump is a dictator or whether, he's a monarch and no king's rallies and all this stupidity wouldn't exist if people actually looked at history. And I'm not even asking you to go back in history to read about the Revolution and read about John Adams and read about Ben Franklin. I mean, little is known in our history, for example, that Ben Franklin actually spent 10 years in England and was instrumental as one of the defense witnesses or one of the witnesses against the Stamp Act. He was called at that time by William Pitt and Edmund Burke and some of the others who were testifying in the British Parliament that the American colonies need not be taxed. And Ben Franklin actually was instrumental in doing that on the other side, even though he originally began with that. We don't know this. It's not taught. It's not relevant. Our history almost always seems to be post-Vietnam and how everybody needs to hate America because America fought in an unpopular war. Now again, my message to you today, and I hope this recording or this message that you get in a broadcast version will electrify you to begin to do your own research and ask yourself why America matters. Why would an immigrant like me even study this? It is fascinating. It is truly, truly incredible to read that. Now let's fast forward. My father got an opportunity through that American company to go to South Korea. My father was the first person in our family to ever go to a foreign country when he went and trained in Caltex Petroleum in the Philippines in 1955. And then in 1969, he was sent as a startup specialist to Yosu in South Korea. I was a lad of about 7 because I was too young to be shipped off to boarding school as my brother was. My dad told my mom and I to come and join him in South Korea. So after my dad had been there a while, he asked my mom and I to join, and my mom and I flew from Calcutta to Hong Kong. Again, first time we got on a plane. Here I am in Hong Kong at the age of 7 in the year 1969. The first time I'd seen an escalator, first time I'd been on a ferry, first time I'd seen soft serve ice cream, first time I'd seen many things as a young kid from rural India. And one of the things I got to see on that 21st of July in 1969, circa around 7 p.m., 6:56 I think they say, was the landing on the moon on a black and white TV in a storefront window. I'd never seen a TV up until that time, and I'm looking into the window and I'm seeing the landing on the moon. And those momentous words by Neil Armstrong, that astronaut who gave that word about the small step for man and a giant leap for mankind. I remember looking at my pop, I was all of 7. I said, wow, what a country, they can put a man on the moon. Up until that time, this was a country that was whipping the bad guys, was winning the wars. You watched all of the heroes of the World War II. America and the Allies projected in a light that saved the world and saved Western civilization. The gratitude was overwhelming that I had for a nation that I knew nothing about. All I knew that it catered to my father's salary because my dad worked for an American company, and as a result of that, I had this rare privilege. I want you to see the thread. When gratitude is presented as a healthy emotion, Hans Selye said, it becomes the healthiest emotion of all, and anger becomes destructive and detrimental. We're not teaching people gratitude in this day and age for that very reason. If we ask them to be grateful for something, the anger will dissipate. I have shared with you many times, and again I've said, if you've heard me a minute or many times, you've heard me make this statement over and over again. Hope without gratitude is hopelessness, and change without strategy is cluelessness. What do we want to become? What do we want to change to? If they decide that the rally is going to be successful and they have no kings and they are marching and they think that the election and they want to always talk about impeachment, what do they get? Do they even understand the Constitution that if they do impeach one man, who they're going to get is his vice president? You're not going to be able to topple the government because the freely elected people elected him. They don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand the hierarchy. They just think. The stupidity on the streets of America is so rampant, and it's because we have not taught gratitude. We have not showcased the true heroes of the thing. January 6, 1981, again, I don't know how this speech came to me, again in India. I was, I think, in my final year of my undergrad, getting ready to go for grad school, and Ronald Reagan's speech came to me, January 6th, I remember, it's my birthday, when he talked about the shining city on the hill that will always be the beacon. We will be a shining city on a hill. Today, as Christians, we talk about that, but we gloss over the fact that America was, is, and always will be God's gift to the planet. The rest is just a package deal. Trust me on that. Now again, I'm an immigrant. I don't have a dog in this fight. With the resources we have amassed in other parts of the world because of our investments and our ability, I can probably move somewhere else if I need to. But I choose this because this is the greatest parcel of land on planet Earth. We're going through right now our World Cup experience, where America as a host has absolutely befuddled its detractors, as you see reel after reel of people who come from other parts of the world saying, I can't believe your kindness, I can't believe your generosity, I can't believe your camaraderie, I can't believe your get-together, your stick-to-itiveness, and your wanting others to succeed. So first, I'm a young man learning about courage on the movie screen. Then as a young man, a young kid, I watched Neil Armstrong land on the moon. Then I hear Ronald Reagan. And in 1986, I arrived with hope and gratitude and $9 to my name to New York. And in New York, something amazing happened. Our flight to Dallas got delayed, or our flight from Amsterdam or something was delayed, but I know we ended up in a hotel in Queens that Pan Am, that now defunct airline, had put us up in. And we arrived in this little hotel in Queens, New York, and just what we had on our back was with us because our checked luggage had already been sent through or whatever. And I remember, with nothing to my name, $9, arriving late, my wife finding out while we were in New York that she'd been laid off from her job. I opened the windows of a very cold New York day in Queens, and all I saw was graffiti across, and I panicked for a second because that graffiti and that wall that I saw from that hotel looked like Beirut after a bombing. And this was not the America I dreamt about, because I had pictures of Statue of Liberty in my room, and I had pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I had seen all the beauty of America. And I remember my bride telling me, she says, don't worry, Dallas is going to be prettier. And I thought to myself, that's it. That's exactly what it is. Something else has always got to give us hope. Otherwise, what you see will stymie you. Just because I arrived in America and saw graffiti in Queens doesn't mean I should have quit. Just because something is going on in your life that you cannot comprehend, just because there's an increase in the price of gas because of a conflict half a world away, because we don't understand true evil, just because the grocery store bills go up and someone can't afford, doesn't mean you throw the experiment out with the bathwater. And that's what we seem to be doing to this beautiful country. Every step, and this is from both sides. I know this is conservative, not bitter, and sometimes Republicans don't like to hear this. But we don't want to solve any of the true problems because we are worried about whether we will get elected again. Folks, America is an amazing experiment, and that's what it is. When you look at John Adams and you look at Thomas Jefferson and you look at their writings with each other and you look at Daniel Webster's speech given on their memorial on the 2nd of August in 1826 when both these great men died on the same day, he doesn't just stop at glorifying their work. He talks about the fact that this is a nation endowed by the Creator and that we have inalienable rights that come from that Creator. And until we acknowledge the fact that we are a God-fearing nation, unless we acknowledge the fact that we as a nation historically have always been on the right side of gravity because we have always believed in the greater good. Does that mean our families don't have problems? Does that mean we don't have division within our own homes? Of course it does not. We're all going to have strife. But the gratitude we need to have, and take this from an immigrant as we celebrate these 250 years, stop competing with civilizations that are older than you. I've been to museums in ancient Greece where their artifacts are from, 300 BC or 4000 BC or whatever it is. Likewise, same thing with the museum in Egypt. America, most of our antiques are plastic. It is a young civilization. Most of our inherent grace is borrowed. But we need to be careful because you need to understand that the enemy that is sleeping within you is silent, and the enemy that is near you is actually dormant. But they are percolating, and they are doing something significant to upset the apple cart. When we come back on the other side of the break, I'm going to share with you why it is important to pay attention to what you have and what you have been given. You have been given a freedom. You have been given an unchecked, unfettered freedom. You have been given that freedom of speech guaranteed by that First Amendment. You have been given all these rights, and somehow, when we look at just rights, you'll end up with a revolution. But with those rights come a great responsibility. This is why Benjamin Franklin's famous words was a republic if you can keep it. We need to be careful. And as an immigrant, I'm not sounding an alarm, but I'm saying I have enjoyed the beauty of this nation because I looked at it through its own courage. I looked at it through its own advancements. I looked at it through its own science. I looked at it through its own opportunities. I looked at it through its own leaders, and I came to this conclusion. This truly is a unique place. In all of human history, it will stand the test of time. But we are teetering on the edge of something cataclysmic. Something that is percolating, that is making our gratitude erode. More after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Huff Radio Show. This is your guest host, Krish Dhanam, filling in for my dear friend Todd Huff. As Todd earns a well-deserved break, trying to bring to us the optimism and the hope day in, day out, I am truly grateful for these privileges he gives me. As I mentioned before we went to the break, that he's asked me to fill in for a couple of episodes this month and a couple of episodes in August, and I use the word episodes as opposed to broadcast because, again, I don't have a broadcasting background in me. I just fill in. Even when I use the word guest host, I think that's just me propping myself up to be something more important than I am. I am just a humble immigrant who's been a culture commentator, an orator, and a speaker. If you want to reach me, my address is krish@patriotacademy.com. krish@patriotacademy.com. Check out Patriot Academy. This is a place where we are trying to fight the good fight, teaching young people the art and science of politics, giving them the gratitude in America's history, bringing them important edicts as happened in the Men Who Made America from the rebel stage and in the stage before the revolution, linking them to Daniel Boone and others, and then talking about after the revolution and introducing them to the likes of Carson and Fremont and the expedition they made. We do amazing work at the Patriot Institute. We have finished 2 years, and we've now graduated year 1, 12, year 2, 27. We're going into our 3rd year. We are seeking some accreditation for the courses. But check us out. This is what I get to do as an immigrant. I'm the dean of the Patriot Institute. I teach worldviews. I teach apologetics. I teach moral philosophies. I teach communication. And you have to pinch yourself to ask yourself, where else can this work that a guy from India with his accent and all stumbles into America and 40 years later is teaching Americans about America? What a joy that is, and how glorious our Lord is to allow me that privilege. Now, the reason I love doing this is because it's a joy. But secondly, I want to make this one about gratitude. I want this message of America's 250 as to why America matters about gratitude. So if you remember, I'm trying to create the chronology in this particular message, that I was a young kid in India and I watched a lot of John Wayne movies and actually came full circle and went to see the birthplace of John Wayne in Winterset, Iowa, and if you get a chance, do that. And then I got to hear Ronald Reagan's speech that was sent to me in 1981, and I think I heard it in some kind of a rickety way on some contraption in India that I probably could not afford. And then in 1986, when I came to America, and some years later, I actually got to speak in the Quad Cities and went to Tampico, Illinois, and got to see the birthplace of Ronald Wilson Reagan, and eventually actually went and saw his library as well. As you probably guess, I'm a big Ronald Reagan fan. Hearing Ronald Reagan, watching John Wayne, watching the landing on the moon, landing in America, coming to New York, and getting words of encouragement from my wife before we landed in Dallas was my journey. Nothing profound and nothing significant. The heavens didn't part, but it was the journey. Now, I landed in New York and was processed in an airport, and the gentleman who processed me said, "You've done it right, you've done it legally, you've done it fairly, it'll take a couple of hours." This was the day before the computers we today have that are swift and fast. Or the days now when I just walk into the airport and don't even have to show my passport, and somehow my retina scan is framed, and the global entry processing allows me to walk through, and as I'm walking through at a fairly distinct pace, the man who's welcoming me into this nation is just looking at an iPad and says, "Welcome back, Mr. Dunham," and waves me through. What a difference. What a difference coming to this country, clutching all my possessions and being vetted for 2 hours to get in. The reason I say vetted is I did it right. I did it legally. I don't have to look over my shoulder. In fact, I've shared with this before, but you need to know this. 40 years ago, when you came to America, you had to show your medical clearance in India before the U.S. Embassy in India gave you an application to file for a visa. You had to have your police clearance in India before you were allowed to sit for an interview. Today, we look at the travesty of our immigration system, and the reason it is where we are is because America is no longer sold as that gratitudinal heaven that people need to aspire for to get, that you need to work to achieve something so good. The founders of this nation, the ones who sweat their blood and gave their lives and their sacred honor, and when they signed the Declaration on that July 4th day, little is known that July 2nd there was a stalemate, and then Caesar Rodney, I think, had to make that momentous ride up from Delaware in a storm to break the tie, and then July 4th became the day in which our Declaration was signed. Those 56 men basically were signing their death warrant. There was a price to pay to belong to a free nation. But if you read Os Guinness's what he calls the Magna Carta of Humanity, Os Guinness articulates that since the Sinai Revolution, the American Revolution is the only one where people didn't elect a king. That's what happened when Israel was first formed. They refused a king after their exile, and they were framing a new nation. He says the Magna Carta of Humanity shows us that the American Revolution was the only one after the Sinai Revolution that did not go the route of selecting a king or an emperor. When you come to our Patriot Academy chambers in Dallas, two of the things you'll see are the resignation of George Washington as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, and then his resignation after 2 terms of a president, because he says that if I continued in what you're asking me to do, I would be no different than the people we have just defeated, when he resigned his commission as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. And King George is purported to have said at that time, here lies probably the greatest man ever, because he never sought it for power. They truly wanted to be a free nation. And that's very important to understand. What is this attribute of freedom as we look at this 250th year of American independence that people seem to doubt? They do not even realize that their ability to protest wearing grotesque costumes, stupid hairdos, multiple piercings, all kinds of raggedy clothes, almost looking like a caricature out of a comic book, and they want to be taken seriously, and they are. Their placards are misspelt, and if those they are spelt right, they seem to all be in unison, and there's an organization of distrust in this nation. There is a man who actually shorts the currencies of nations, which means he's really hoping on an economic debacle in the currencies he shorts, and that's how he made his fortune. And that is the guy funding most of the problems from the other side. Now, the reason I share this, and sometimes I get angry, sometimes I get excited, and sometimes I get jubilant in the fact that God's hand has still been on this nation. If you look at all the things we have had and all the things we have done, if you look at the fact that God destroyed an entire nation in Sodom and Gomorrah because of the debauchery they participated in at that time, and has still allowed this nation to exist when you look at the debauchery of the last 10 years, when you look at what we have succumbed to, it is fascinating how far we have walked away from God. My message and my plea is always the same. The reason I talk about the greatness of America is inbuilt in that gratitude is a genteel prayer. This is the prayer that George Washington gave up. This is the prayer that was offered at different parts. This is the prayer that Benjamin Franklin asked people to go when there was a stalemate in the Constitutional Congress at that time, or in the ratification of the United States Constitution some years later. Now, I gave American history as best a gloss I could for those of you listening. Hopefully you'll understand that this is all part of the broader narrative of why America matters. Folks, we are on the cusp of something evil. We are on the cusp of something horrendous. If you don't hear me now. We may not pay attention to all the things that are happening, the temples that are being built, the mosques that are being built. Recently, when I spoke in a church, I got a lot of flack for the fact that, hey, why do you care how many mosques are being built? Well, as mosques are being built and churches are being closed, and the number of people are now starting to escape our attention because of the populace, the lack of immigration vetting, all of these things, I want you to go back to that Christmas Eve night at the Battle of Trenton, when George Washington decided with 3 battalions, I think one succeeded, the other 2 got frozen, and they surprised the Hessian soldiers. The only reason they were able to surprise the Hessian soldiers and overtake and have a victory at that time was because they caught them unaware. Folks, our very history is built on the fact that we surprised our enemy. And when we surprised our enemy and caught them unaware, we had a victory. And that victory led to the turning and the battling of new ideas. A new morale came in. Washington was given a little more power by Congress at that time. He began to allocate money and promise things to people who were going to desert otherwise. That small victory changed the fate of the American Revolution. In fact, they say historians have revealed that only 2 people died, and those 2 died of frozen. And the rest of them said that, you could only realize that the people had marched in that snow because of the blood in the snow. Ill-equipped. The only reason they won is because of everything against them and the tide against them. They won that night because they surprised the others. And the others did not expect themselves to be attacked. More after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Huff Radio Show, the home of conservative, not bitter. This is your humble host, Krish Dhanam, filling in for Todd Huff. I like the way a humble host sounds, or I like the way host sounds. I guess that does a little boost for my ego. I'm not a radio guy, I'm not a broadcaster. I tried podcasting for a while, and many of the social things that are required, I don't think I did very well in the digital space. So I'm always grateful for these little opportunities I get to foray into them. Even on social media, I don't think I'm very active because I'm not a marketing guy that way. I love how Todd has put this show together, and I love the moniker conservative, not bitter. Hopefully, so far you've gotten a good gist of the American experiment. I gave you some historical data, I gave you some contemporary data, I gave you a perspective from an immigrant. But why America matters is very important as you look at the very American Revolution. We are 250 years into this great and grandiose experiment. On that July 4th day in 1776, when those men gathered, a couple of them signed then, most of them signed I think on the 2nd of August, but almost all who agreed to do it were putting their lives at stake. Little is known about the fact that I think they tried it on the 2nd of July. There was a stalemate and Caesar Rodney had to come and break that tie. But I love American history because it's fascinating. It is filled with courage. It is filled with optimism. Many of the things that are not told anymore. But as we do this final segment for today, as we look at this 250th year of American independence, the beauty of this amazing nation, I want to hearken you back to that Christmas day when Washington had a victory that came after many losses. The Boston victory and then receding all the way. They lose battle after battle, and New York is a disaster, and then they're on their way. The Congress itself is contemplating moving out of Philadelphia now to Baltimore, and they don't know what to do. And Washington is receding and receding and receding. And he makes this decision. He makes this decision to take three groups of people and surprise the British. The Hessian soldiers, who were the forefront of the British Army at that time, at Trenton, were caught unawares, flat-footed, so to speak, in their drunken stupor of a night of celebration. Why not? Christmas is a time of celebration, and Christians, we celebrate these things. We celebrated July 4th that way. No harm, no foul. I get to wear my red, white, and blue. I get to fire off fireworks. We have patriotic songs. Lee Greenwood plays in the background. And man, it's great to be in America. Well, those soldiers probably had that same kind of drunken stupor that morning as they were walking off or waking up from that hangover. Many of them probably still asleep from the hangover. They had celebrated, and they had every right to celebrate. They had vanquished the Americans. They had victory after victory after victory, and Washington was now dealing with battle-beleaguered troops. Their uniforms were damp, their clothes were kind of torn, their shoes and their socks. Some said it was the blood in the snow that told you that the troops had marched. Two of the people got sidelined. They couldn't make it. Two of the troops got snowed in, and the ice was so far, so Washington just had this one group of people, one battalion, so to speak. And yet he surprised them. He caught them off guard. That victory changed the tide. That victory changed the course of the American Revolution. A new hope was born. A new birth was given. A new command was offered Washington, and a new power was given to Washington by Congress. If you read David McCullough's book, as I mentioned earlier, 1776, you'll see that Washington makes some decisions, I think on the 1st or 2nd, and starts offering his troops some stuff. And then that power comes a little later, which means they gave him the power that he took even before he got the power, because he saw the opportunity of hope. Folks, we are on that cusp. We are like the Hessian soldiers right now. We're in that drunken stupor. We're enjoying the revelry of our July 4th. We're enjoying our fireworks. We're enjoying our patriotism, our red, white, and blue. We're loving the symbolism of all the little commemorative markers we make, the mugs we make, the trophies we make. Everything has the flag on it, and we're going to buy it and we're going to preserve it because it's going to be a monument to the fact that we were alive when America celebrated 250. But there's a silent enemy, there's a despondent enemy, there is a depressed enemy, there is a radicalized enemy. Whether it is Islam deciding to swear on the Quran and you're saying that's ceremonial, but for them it's not because they are professing in the name of their Prophet and Allah, and they've got about 200 victories in municipal and congressional elections and all the other stuff. Whether it's the Hindus building temples and taking over industry after industry, or whether it's your own Americans getting laid off. Be careful in this drunken stupor, because it's when the enemy is convinced that there is no enemy, or when the person who is going to be vanquished is convinced that there's no enemy strong enough. I'm American, I'll survive this too. But first time on our shores, we have communists in power at the major cities. Yeah, 9/11 rallied us together, but that same city elected a communist. Be careful of what kind of stupor you're in today as you're listening to this. Wake up. Have the gratitude in your heart. When we do our next thing, I'll give you some signs as to what else is on the pike. But this is our 250th. Let's celebrate it. God bless America, and God bless each and every one of you. See you down the road.